While preparing dinner, for my wife's entire family, I stepped into the garage for more chairs and heard her brother say, "I still can't believe you married this loser. Dad's right. You need to divorce him before you have kids and get stuck forever." She replied, "Already working on it. My lawyer says we can take half his business too." I returned with the chairs and continued hosting with a perfect smile. 3 days later, my WhatsApp was flooded with 47 desperate messages begging me. Something felt off about Alexandra the week before her family dinner. Not the normal kind of off, like when she's stressed about work or annoyed. I left my boots in the hallway again. This was different. She kept checking her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, switched tabs whenever I walked behind her laptop, and started taking calls in another room. After 7 years together, you develop a sense for these things, like how you can tell when a wall isn't plumbed just by looking at it. Look, I never thought I'd be writing one of these posts. I'm not the type to air dirty laundry online, but I'm sitting here at 3 a.m. with a glass of whiskey, still in disbelief about how my life imploded in just 3 days. I need to get this out somewhere, and you internet strangers are getting front row seats to the shit show. Some background. I'm James, 34. I built my construction business from scratch after dropping out of community college. Started with just me and a beat-up truck. Now I've got 5 crews running projects across the county. Nothing massive, but it pays the bills and then some. Alexandra, 32, is my wife of 7 years. I supported her through law school, paid tuition, rent, everything, while building my business. She comes from an upper-middle-class family that never really approved of the blue-collar guy their daughter brought home. Her dad Elijah is some kind of financial advisor. Her mom Pamela is in real estate, and her brother Thomas thinks his business degree makes him God's gift to capitalism. Here's the thing. I always knew they thought she could do better. The side comments about my little business or asking when I'd go back to school never stopped, but Alexandra always defended me, or so I thought. Last Saturday was the annual spring dinner at our place, a tradition Alexandra insisted on to show off our home to her family. I spent the morning prepping the yard, pressure washing the deck, and helping with the cooking. Everything had to be perfect for our family. I'd been up since 6 getting the smoker ready for the brisket I'd been dry aging all week. Alexandra was more tense than usual, snapping at me for small things, but I chalked it up to the usual family dinner stress. Everyone arrived around 4. Her parents, her brother Thomas and his wife, her younger sister Magnolia who's still in grad school. Alexandra's mom immediately started critiquing the living room furniture arrangement while her dad asked pointed questions about how business was going with that tone that suggested he was waiting for me to admit failure. By 6, we were ready to eat. I'd set up the dining table with our good plates, the ones we got as wedding gifts and barely use, but realized we needed 2 more chairs from the garage. As I headed out through the side door, I heard voices around the corner of the house. Thomas and Alexandra were standing by the azaleas, sharing a cigarette, which was weird since she supposedly quit 3 years ago. I was about to call out when I heard my name. I froze. Thomas was saying how he still couldn't believe she married this and that their dad was right. She needed to divorce me before having kids and getting stuck forever. What Alexandra said next felt like taking a sledgehammer to the chest. She was already working on it, and her lawyer said that they could take half my business too. I stood there completely numb as they laughed about how I had no idea what was coming. They kept talking. Something about someone named Dominic being a much better fit for her and how she'd wasted her best years with me while I was playing construction. Have you ever had a moment where your entire reality just shifts? 7 years of marriage, the countless nights I stayed up helping her study for exams, the vacations we skipped so she could afford law textbooks, the extra jobs I took to cover her student loans, all of it suddenly looked different in the harsh light of what I just heard. But I didn't yell, didn't confront them. Something inside me went ice cold. I quietly backed away, grabbed 2 folding chairs from the garage, took 3 deep breaths, and plastered on the fakest smile of my life. Walking back inside, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. I looked perfectly normal. Inside, nuclear wasteland. The rest of that dinner was surreal. I poured wine, carved the brisket, laughed at her dad's terrible jokes, and watched my wife, this stranger across the table, act like everything was normal. I studied her face trying to find the woman I married. Had she always looked at me with that barely concealed contempt, or was I just seeing it now? When her mom complimented the food and asked for my secret recipe, I nearly lost it. 7 years of family dinners and now she decides I might have something worth knowing? I explained the dry aging process with mechanical precision while my brain screamed. At one point, her sister Magnolia gave me this weird look, like she was trying to figure something out. She's always been the only decent one in that family. I wonder if she knew. After dessert, Thomas raised a toast to family and future changes. Looking directly at Alexander with his smug little smirk, I clinked glasses and drank, thinking about how satisfying it would be to break that crystal stemware across his face. When they finally left around 11, Alexandra started cleaning up, humming to herself, humming like she hadn't just destroyed our entire life. I told her I'd finish the dishes and she should get some rest. She kissed my cheek and said I was such a good husband. The audacity nearly made me vomit. After she went to bed, I checked her laptop, password protected, new for her. But I knew she used the same pattern for most accounts. Third try I was in. The emails to her lawyer started 3 months ago. The plan was to file after she secured a partnership at her firm, using my income to help her status, then divorcing me once she locked it in. There were spreadsheets documenting my business assets, our accounts, even a fucking timeline for the divorce. And there it was, A transfer record showing she'd been moving small amounts to a separate account for months, just under amounts that would trigger notifications. Smart. Lawyer smart. I checked our joint savings. 20,000 missing. The money I'd been putting aside for the business expansion. Our future. Then I found the text with someone saved as D. Apparently, Dominic wasn't just a better fit. He was already test driving my replacement. The text went back 6 months. 6 fucking months. I didn't sleep that night or the next. I called in sick to work on Monday, first time in 3 years, and met with a divorce attorney while Alexandra was at the office. Guy named Mike, who a buddy recommended, told him everything. Showed him the screenshots I'd taken. Mike laid it out straight. In our state, she could potentially get half my business value since it grew substantially during our marriage, even though she never lifted a finger to help with it, even though I built it from nothing while supporting her through school. When he told me the potential settlement amount, I almost blacked out. Everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed for, cut in half and handed to the woman who was planning to blindside me. I remember asking Mike, so what? I just bend over and take it? He started talking about amicable settlement and minimizing damages, but I was already gone mentally. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. That night, Alexandra asked if I was feeling better, brought home soup, acted concerned. I played along, said I was just tired, probably coming down with something. She suggested I see a doctor. The performance was Oscar. I nodded, thanked her for caring, told her I loved her. She said it back without hesitation, those 3 meaningless words falling from her lips while she planned my financial execution. I watched her scroll through Instagram as we sat on the couch, stopping to like a photo of us from last Christmas that her sister posted. The caption read, #couple goals. I nearly laughed out loud. It was like living with a stranger wearing my wife's face. Every movement, every word felt calculated. Had she always been this person? Had I been blind for 7 years or had she changed? Does it even matter? Here's the thing. I've never considered myself a vindictive man. When contractors try to screw me over, I usually just cut ties and move on. When clients don't pay on time, I work with them. But this was different. This wasn't business. This was my life. As I lay awake that second night, watching her sleep peacefully beside me, probably dreaming about spending my money with Dominic, something hardened inside me, a clarity I've never felt before. You see, Alexandra and her family always underestimated me. They saw the calloused hands and lack of degree and assumed I was simple. They never understood that building something from nothing requires intelligence, strategy, patience. I started making phone calls the next morning, first to my bank, then to my business partner, then to a few key clients. By noon, I had a plan for me. By dinner, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Alexandra wants war? Fine. But she's bringing a butter knife to a chainsaw fight. This isn't about money anymore. It's about showing her and her entire family exactly who they decided to fuck with. The loser they looked down on for 7 years is about to give them a masterclass in consequences. So here I am, 3 days after that dinner, finalizing my blueprint for demolition. And just like any good construction project, you need to lay the groundwork before you build. Tomorrow, everything changes. Alexandra thinks she's got it all figured out, but she has no idea what's coming. Neither does her family or Dominic, whoever the fuck he is. I supported her dreams for 7 years. Now I get to watch hers crumble in real time. Update. First, thanks for all the support on my last post. Never expected that kind of response. For those asking if I have calmed down or if I'm thinking more clearly now, nope. Still pissed. Still moving forward. Just more strategically now. Look, when you build something with your hands, you learn that rushing just creates problems you'll have to fix later. Revenge is the same way. It needs a proper foundation. The morning after I posted, Alexandra left for work like any normal day, kissed me goodbye, reminded me to call the plumber about that leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, asked if I could pick up her dry cleaning. The absolute normality of it was surreal, like watching someone sleepwalk through a minefield they planted themselves. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, I got to work. First order of business was securing my actual business. Called my accountant for an emergency meeting at the coffee shop down the street from my office. No way I was doing this over the phone or at my workplace where employees might overhear. Here's the thing. When you're building a business while supporting someone through school, you make compromises. Sometimes you don't document everything perfectly. Sometimes you cut corners on paperwork because you're exhausted from working 14-hour days. Alexandra knew this, had even helped with some of our early tax filings when we couldn't afford a proper accountant. The coffee shop meeting was eye-opening. My accountant, let's call him Frank, looks like he hadn't slept in days. Turns out, Alexandra had already contacted him asking innocent questions about business valuation methods and ownership documentation, claimed she was helping me prepare for a potential investor meeting. Frank, not knowing what was happening, had given her some surface-level info, but felt uncomfortable enough to flag it. When I told him what was really going on, the color drained from his face. "James, I need to show you something," he said, pulling out his tablet. He opened a series of documents showing my business transactions from the past 3 years. These highlighted ones, they don't quite add up. Turns out, Alexandra had been doing more than just planning a divorce. She'd been creating a paper trail to make it look like I was mishandling business funds, small discrepancies in dates, amounts moved between accounts at odd times, invoices with inconsistent numbering. Nothing illegal. She was too smart for that, but enough to make things look messy in divorce court. Enough to justify bringing in a forensic accountant who would cost me thousands and find absolutely nothing wrong, but would drag out proceedings for months. Frank and I spent 3 hours documenting everything properly, creating clear trails showing all transactions were legitimate. We accelerated payments to suppliers, paid off equipment loans early, and documented Alexandra's complete non-involvement in the business operation. While we worked, I got a text from Magnolia, Alexandra's sister. This was unusual. We've always been friendly, but rarely text directly. She asked if we could meet for coffee sometime soon, said she needed to talk about something important. I agreed to Saturday morning, wondering what that was about. Next stop, the bank. I'd been stewing on something Alexandra's brother had said at that dinner, a comment about their parents helping her when the time comes. I had a hunch, and hunches in construction often save your ass. At the bank, I spoke with our financial advisor, confirmed what I suspected. Alexandra had applied for a home equity line of credit against our house 2 weeks ago. The house that's primarily in my name because I made the down payment with pre-marriage savings. The house that I renovated myself, adding nearly $100,000 in value. I was still listed as a required signatory, but the paperwork was moving through the system. One more week and she would have had access to about $200,000 in cash that I would be partially responsible for repaying. The advisor seemed uncomfortable when I explained I didn't authorize this. After showing my ID and marriage certificate, I was able to cancel the application. Then I moved half of our joint savings into my personal account, exactly the amount I had contributed. Is that petty? Maybe? But it's a fuck of a lot less than she was planning to take. When I got home, I did something I'm not proud of. But desperate times and all that, I installed tiny recording devices in our living room and bedroom. Completely legal in our state since it's my house too, but definitely crosses an ethical line. I also set up a camera in our home office angled toward her desk. Then I took the dog for a walk around the neighborhood like nothing was wrong, waved to the neighbors, tossed a ball for the Jenkins kid, picked up some dog shit with a little plastic bag while casually planning the complete dismantling of my marriage. Normal Tuesday stuff. That night over dinner, Alexandra seemed distracted, checking her phone constantly. When I asked about her day, she gave vague answers, then her phone buzzed again, and I caught a glimpse of the name on this Dominic. Who's Dominic? I asked, keeping my voice casual while reaching for more pasta. The fork paused halfway to her mouth just for a second. Oh, new client at the firm. Time-sensitive case. Then she put her phone face down on the table. That slight hesitation told me everything. 7 years with someone, you notice these. Must be important if he's texting you during dinner, I said. Still Mr. Relaxed Husband. She gave me this tight smile. You know how it is. Some people don't respect boundaries. The irony almost made me choke on my garlic bread. After dinner, she said she needed to finish some work and disappeared into the home office. I cleaned the kitchen, making enough noise so she'd think I was busy, then silently moved to the hallway near the office door, which she'd left slightly ajar. I could hear her voice low and intimate, not her client voice, not her talking to family voice, her bedroom voice. Can't just call whenever you want. No, he doesn't suspect anything. Just be patient. Yes, I miss you too. Each word was another nail in the coffin of whatever feelings I still had for her. Her. The rage I'd been tamping down threatened to boil over. I wanted to burst through that door to confront her, to end the charade right now, but that would have ruined everything. So I walked away, back to the kitchen, turned on the faucet, pretended to wash more dishes while planning my next moves. Here's the thing about building, timing matters. Pour concrete too soon after the rain, it won't set right. Rush the framing, the whole structure is compromised. This revenge needed time to cure properly. Wednesday morning, I accidentally left divorce papers I'd printed out visible on my nightstand. Not filled in, just the standard forms from the county website. When I came back from my shower, they were slightly moved. She'd looked at them, but she said nothing. Neither did I. At work, I quietly began preparation. Called in favors from clients who owed me, not for money, for information. Turns out Dominic wasn't just some random guy. He was a close friend of Thomas, Alexandra's brother. They'd gone to college together. He came from the same kind of money as her family, the kind of guy her parents had always wanted for. And here's where it gets interesting. Dominic had been at several family events I'd skipped over the years because I was working. Birthday parties, a ski trip, even a fucking cruise I couldn't go on because I was finishing a big project. The project that actually established my business. Through a mutual acquaintance, I learned Dominic and Alexandra had dated briefly in college before we met. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just an affair. This was a long game. While digging into all this, I also created a detailed spreadsheet documenting every penny I'd spent supporting Alexandra through school. Tuition, books, rent, a laptop I bought her for graduation, the bar exam prep course, the interview suits, the countless Ubers home from late-night study sessions because I didn't want her on public transit after dark. Grand total, $143,622, not including interest I could have earned if I'd invested that money in my business instead. That night, Alexandra initiated sex for the first time in months. I almost laughed at the timing. Was this part of her plan too? Keep me distracted and satisfied while she arranged my financial execution? I went along with it, performing as expected, feeling nothing but detachment as she play-acted passion. Afterward, while she slept, I sat in the dark staring at the ceiling fan, counting rotations instead of sheep. One thought kept circling. How long had our marriage been a lie? Was it always transactional for her? Was I just a stepping stone? Thursday morning brought my coffee meet up with Magnolia. I arrived early, checking Reddit on my phone while I waited. The support from you internet strangers was still flowing in. Some suggested extreme measures I'd never consider. Others shared similar stories that made mine seem tame by comparison. The solidarity helped somehow. Magnolia arrived looking nervous. She's always been the odd one in that family, more genuine, less concerned with appearances. She ordered some complicated coffee drink and picked at a muffin while making small talk. Finally, she took a deep breath. What she told me next confirmed everything. She'd known about Alexandra and Dominic for months, had caught them together at their parents' lake house during that family weekend. I'd missed because of a water damage emergency at a job site. She'd confronted Alexandra, who swore it was a one-time mistake, but it wasn't. Alexandra had confided in Magnolia recently. Drunk after a family dinner I'd also missed, told her the whole plan. Stay with me until making partner, then upgrade to Dominic with half my assets as her golden parachute. Magnolia was telling me this because she couldn't stomach it anymore. Said she'd always liked me, thought I was good for her sister, couldn't understand why her family never gave me a fair chance. I thanked her for her honest, careful not to reveal I already knew most of this. Asked her to keep our conversation between us. She agreed, seeming relieved to unburden herself. As she left, she hugged me and whispered that she was sorry. It was the first genuine human connection I'd felt in days. Thursday night, I set the next phase in motion. Created a fake business emergency called Alexandra saying I needed all hands on deck for a crisis meeting the next night. Major client threatening to pull out, potential financial disaster, needed her support and her family's advice. She hesitated, said she had plans. I pushed harder. Let my voice crack as said I was scared of losing everything we'd built. Played on her guilt. She relented. Agreed to host an emergency family dinner Friday night. Said she'd call her parents and Thomas. Perfect. Friday morning, I put the final touches on my preparations. Set up the dining room with printouts hidden in a folder by my seat. Loaded all the evidence onto a tablet, screenshots, recordings, financial records, everything. Picked up her favorite dessert from that bakery across town she loved so much. At work, I made sure everything was in order. Had a frank conversation with my business partner who was understandably shocked but fully supportive. We'd been friends since high school. He knew what Alexandra's schooling had cost me in more ways than one. When I got home, Alexandra was already there setting the table with our good plates again. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. Another family dinner. Same stage, entirely different play about to unfold. She seemed jittery, checking her phone constantly. When I asked if everyone was confirmed for dinner, she nodded distractedly, said her parents were bringing wine. Thomas and his wife would be there too. I suggested inviting Magnolia as well. Alexandra looked surprised, but agreed, texting her sister while I watched. The gang would all be there. Perfect. As I headed upstairs to shower and change, Alexandra called after me, asking what the client issue was specifically so she could prepare her thoughts. I told her I'd explain everything during dinner, wanted to go through it just once with everyone present. Under the shower spray, I rehearsed what I would say, how I would present the evidence, the order of revelations for maximum impact. It felt surreal, like planning a presentation for the most fucked up client meeting ever. I got dressed in the clothes Alexandra had always said made me look most professional. Dark jeans, blue button-down, leather shoes instead of work boots, the costume from my final performance as her doting husband. Downstairs, I could hear her on the phone in hushed tones. Thanks to the recorder in the living room, I'd be able to review that conversation later if needed. But I already knew who she was talking to, already knew what she was saying. Let her have this last moment of thinking she's in control. Let her reassure Dominic that everything's going according to plan. Let her believe for these final hours that she's the smartest person in the room. The doorbell rang. Alexandra jumped, quickly ending her call. Her parents arrived first, her father bringing an expensive bottle of wine as promised. He shook my hand with that same condescending grip, already asking about this business emergency with barely concealed satisfaction in his voice. Thomas and his wife arrived next, followed shortly by Magnolia, who couldn't quite meet my eyes. The gang was all here, all the players in position. As we moved to the dining room, Alexandra put her hand on my arm asking if I was okay. The concern in her voice sounded so genuine that for a split second, I almost doubted everything. Almost wondered if I'd constructed an elaborate conspiracy theory out of coincidences and misunderstandings. Then her phone buzzed in her pocket. I saw Dominic's name flash on the screen before she quickly silenced it, and any last shred of doubt evaporated. I took my seat at the head of the table, the folder of evidence beside my plate. Alexandra sat to my right, her father to my left. The symmetry was perfect, just like the dinner where I discovered her betrayal. But now I was the one with secrets. As Alexandra's mother asked about the wine option, I caught Magnolia watching me with a strange expression. Part curiosity, part dread. She knew something was coming, just not what. I stood up, wineglass in hand, and everyone fell silent, expecting me to explain the business emergency. I smiled at each of them in turn, saving Alexandra for last. Before we get to the reason I called this meeting, I said, raising my glass, I'd like to propose a toast. To family, to loyalty, and to finally seeing things clearly. The confusion on their faces was just the beginning. They had no idea what was coming next, and neither did Alexandra. Final update. I've been staring at my phone for the last hour watching the message counter climb. 47 texts from Alexandra in just under 3 days, each one more desperate than the last. Look, I promised to tell you what happened at that dinner, and it was wild. I just raised my glass in that toast to family, loyalty, and finally seeing things clearly. The confusion on everyone's faces was priceless. I sat down calmly and took a sip of Elijah's expensive wine. So about this business emergency I mentioned, Alexandra squeezed my hand encouragingly. The absolute performance of it, I almost had to admire her commitment. Well, I continued pulling out my tablet. I've discovered some serious problems that threaten everything I've built. Problems developing right under my nose. Elijah leaned forward with barely contained smugness. Financial issues? Cash flow problems? I've always said your business model seemed precarious. Actually, I said, connecting my tablet to our TV, the problem isn't with my business, it's with my marriage. The room went silent. Alexandra's hand froze on mine. James, she whispered, what are you doing? Here's the thing. When you're demolishing a structure, you don't start with the roof. You undermine the foundation first. So I played the recording of Alexandra and Thomas from the previous dinner, their voices filling the room. Thomas saying she needed to divorce me before having kids and getting stuck forever. Alexandra replying she was already working on it, and her lawyer said they could take half my business too. I watched each face around the table. Thomas went pale. Alexandra's mother covered her mouth. Elijah's jaw clenched. Magnolia closed her eyes like she was watching a car crash she'd known was coming. And Alexandra just sat there paralyzed as her carefully constructed plan imploded. Next, I showed screenshots of her text with Dominic, carefully edited, but still damning. 6 months, I said quietly. 6 months you've been seeing him while I've been working 60-hour weeks. I turned to her parent. Did you know she was cheating or just that she was planning to divorce me? Elijah tried to interrupt, but I wasn't done. I swiped to my spreadsheet. Every penny I'd spent putting Alexandra through school, $143,622. This is what I invested in our future, I said, while building my business from nothing. Next screen, documentation of her secret bank account and the canceled home equity application. And this is how she planned to thank me. The silence was deafening. Then 3 things happened almost simultaneously. Elijah stood up, knocking his chair backward. This is ridiculous. Alexandra, we're leaving. Alexandra grabbed my arm. James, please, I can explain. And Thomas, the coward, tried deleting messages under the table. I pointed at him. Those messages you're deleting? I already have them. All the times you helped her plan this. Thomas froze, then looked at his wife who stared at him with dawning horror. Alexandra switched tactics. It wasn't like that, she said, tears forming. I was confused, unhappy. We've been growing apart for years. Growing apart, I echoed. While I was paying for your education, while I was building a future for us, I hadn't planned to lose my cool, but something snapped. 7 years, I said, lowering my voice. 7 years, I believed in us. And all this time, I was just a stepping stone. Her father stepped in. Whatever problems you two have are between you. But if you think you can intimidate my daughter with this ambush, you're mistaken. We have resources you can't imagine. I laughed. Resources? You mean like the $20,000 she stole from our joint account or the helllock she tried to take out against my house? As Elijah ranted about all they'd done for us, I noticed Alexandra texting under the table. That's when I dropped the final bomb. Did Alexandra tell you Dominic is married too? I said casually. The room went still. Even Elijah stopped mid-sentence. Yeah, found that out yesterday. His wife's name is Rachel. Very understanding when I showed her the text between her husband and my wife. Alexandra's face drained of color. You what? We had coffee yesterday. Seemed only fair, she should know. That's when Elijah lost it, grabbed the edge of my dining table, the one I'd built by hand, and flipped it. Food, wine, plates, everything went flying. Alexandra screamed. Her mother gasped. Thomas jumped back. I just sat there oddly calm, watching 7 years of pretending crash around us. Magnolia was the only one who moved to help clean up. Our eyes met across the mess, and she gave me a small nod of respect, understanding. I couldn't tell. Elijah pointed at me, fingers shaking. You think you've won? You're nothing. You build things with your hands because you weren't smart enough for college. My daughter made a mistake slumming with you, but we'll fix it. I stood up slowly. I may work with my hands, Elijah, but at least I built something real. What have you built besides a family of liars? He lunged at me, actually tried to throw a punch. Thomas barely caught him, holding him back while he spewed threats about lawyers. Alexandra kept saying, James, please, let's talk privately. This isn't how you wanted to divorce me, to take half of everything I built while fucking someone else. I shook my head. There's nothing to talk about. I opened the front door. I think you should all leave now. Thomas dragged his father out. Magnolia was the last to leave, pausing at the door. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I always thought you deserved better. Then it was just Alexandra and me in our destroyed dining room. Where are you going to go? She asked, her voice small. I already have a hotel room, I said. I'll be back for my things tomorrow when you're at work. You planned all this, she whispered. I learned from the best, I replied, grabbing my pre-packed overnight bag. As I walked out, she called after me. You'll regret this. My father wasn't bluffing about the lawyers. I didn't respond. Some foundations are too damaged to rebuild on. That night at the hotel, I slept better than I had in months. The next day, I went back while Alexandra was at work, packed what mattered, clothes, tools, family photos, my dog stuff, and left my key on the counter. I'd already rented a small apartment near my workshop, not hiding, just creating space. Called my employees and explained I'd be working remotely dealing with personal matters. For 2 days, I stayed off social media, ignored emails, focused on setting up my new place. The dog adjusted quickly. Animals know when something's wrong in a house. On the third morning, I finally turned my phone back on. It immediately started buzzing. 47 WhatsApp messages from Alexandra, ranging from furious to pleading. The first ones were all caps rage. How dare you embarrass me like that, and you've ruined everything. Then they shifted. James, please call me. We need to talk, and I know I made a mistake, but we can work through this. By message 30, she was bargaining. I'll go to therapy. I'll cut off my family. Just please talk to me. Message 45 was simple. I'm sorry. The final 2 came at 3:14 a.m. I told Dominic everything. About the money, about the divorce plans. He says we should still be together. And then, he just called to break things off. Said he's trying to save his marriage with Rachel. I have nobody now. I read through them without responding, feeling nothing but tired, not satisfaction, not vindication, just emptiness, like finishing a tough job and realizing the client will never appreciate the work. As I scrolled, another message popped up. James, I know you've read these. Please just tell me what you want. Money? The house? I'll sign whatever you want. After everything, she still didn't get it. This was never about money. It was about betrayal. Years wasted. Future stolen. I finally responded. I've already sent the divorce papers to your office. All I want is for this to be over quickly. Her reply came instantly. Can we meet, please, just to talk? Before I could respond, my phone rang. Mike, my lawyer, Rachel, Dominic's wife, had reached out to him. After I'd shown her the evidence, she'd done her own digging and discovered Dominic had pulled similar schemes with other women. She wanted to compare notes for our divorce proceedings. As Mike talked, I looked around my sparse apartment, a mattress on the floor, boxes unpacked, the dog watching me with patient eyes. This wasn't how I'd imagined my life at 34, starting over again. But sometimes you have to tear everything down to fix a compromised foundation. I agreed to meet Rachel for coffee, not romantically, but because there's solidarity and shared betrayal. After hanging up, I sent Alexandra one final message. There's nothing to talk about. The marriage is over. Please direct all future communication through our lawyers. Then I blocked her number. That afternoon, I took the dog hiking. My phone buzzed with a text from Magnolia. Heard you moved out. Alexandra is staying with our parents. Dad's on the warpath, but Mom's finally asking questions about what really happened. Think his perfect daughter facade is cracking. I replied, thanks for letting me know. Hope you're okay in all this. Her response, I am. Better than okay, actually. Finally told them I'm dropping out of the program they chose for me to pursue what I actually want. Guess your courage was contagious. As the sun set, I watched my dog explore. Tail wagging without care. 7 years gone. Countless hours work. A future planned and destroyed, but also freedom, truth, a chance to rebuild, something authentic. My phone buzzed. Rachel confirming our coffee meetup with a link to a support group for people dealing with divorces involving financial deception. Apparently, it's more common than I realized. I pocketed my phone and called the dog. Time to head back. Make dinner, maybe unpack. Small steps, one day at a time. Like any good building project, the foundation comes first. And this time, I'm making damn sure it's solid.